Hello, this is Jackie B. Peterson. I'm the author of Better, Smarter, Richer, 7 Business Principles for Solo and Creative Entrepreneurs. I give you lessons on how to be successful in a business model as a solopreneur. It's the fastest growing business model that there is, as more and more people begin to start their own small enterprises, working on their own, being self-directed, being in charge of their own life, talking about what it is they know how to do, monetizing their expertise. It's a fabulous way to be in business. So I hope you'll visit my website, www.bettersmarterricher.com. You can download my free ebook outlining the 7 principles that make solos different from traditional businesses. And also sign up for our free newsletter and join the conversation on the blog. It's pretty lively. Also, I've got some events coming up, most notably on November 5th, I'm going to be at the Community College, the Small Business Development Center at the Astoria Community College. Come listen while I talk about the 7 business principles. Love, love, love to have you join us. And you can also take a look at some of our past radio shows on www.soloproradio.com. These are all podcasts, and you can listen to them and see the different ways that solos are in business. It's pretty exciting, actually. So today on our show, I'm going to talk to Doug Lundrigan. He's a business coach who likens his work to that of a doctor. He says he examines the symptoms of a sick business, diagnoses the underlying disease, and prescribes effective treatments. Doug names his services leadership, team skills, trust, emotional intelligence, and predictive strategy. So like many of our guests, Doug has taken a long and circuitous route to arrive at his practice today. So we'll get to share his journey and learn more about Doug, his clients, and his business. Hello, Doug.
Hi there, Jackie. Thanks for having me on your program.
Well, thanks for joining us today. This sounds like it's going to be an interesting discussion. So, as I say in our introduction, I referred to your circuitous route to being a leadership coach. Why don't you share your journey with our listeners? Like, where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? And talk about some of the experiences that, shaped you and brought you to where you are today.
Well, thanks, Jackie. And before I get into that, I just want to say that the first time we met was when I attended a seminar you were giving to business consultants and other solopreneurs regarding how to build their businesses. And I was very impressed with the guidance you gave. And so I feel privileged to be on your program.
Well, thanks.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. I'm glad you're here.
Yeah. I grew up in Edmonton, Canada, and I was the son of a wealthy attorney. Yeah, I attended the university in my hometown, but a lot of what shaped my life was some early adversity in my growing up years. A few near-death experiences, a lot of stitches and broken bones. I think I've got more stitches in me than all of my 4 adult kids combined. And so I logged in a lot of hospital time when I was young. But, it made me maybe teachable and independent and adventurous. I was self-motivated, a bit of a risk-taker when I was young. So that kind of shaped me in my early years.
So you discovered early that you didn't mind taking chances and looking at the world in a different way and maybe doing some things that might have felt a little risky.
Exactly. Yeah, my first foray into the entrepreneurial world was when I was 15 years old. Some of your listeners may recall the days before there were plastic bottles. There was a company here in the Northwest as well as in Canada called Pop Shop. And what they did is they sold cases of pop out of a warehouse, and they were glass bottles, kind of heavy. Customers would buy a case or 2 of the various flavors, and they'd take them home and drink them and bring back the empty case with empty bottles, and then they'd get a new case with full bottles. And I noticed whenever my mom wanted to go get more Pop Shop, she would ask me to come along, her teenage son, and it was because she needed me to carry the cases. They were kind of heavy for her. And after a while I thought, you know what, somebody probably needs to deliver these cases to homes like the milkman did, so these poor moms don't have to lug these cases around. So I approached the owner. Here I am, 15 years old, approached the owner of one of these Pop Shop franchises, and I asked if I could buy his pop at wholesale, knock on doors, take orders and deliver the pop to customers. So we struck up a deal. The guy took a little bit of pity on this young punk looking for a job, I guess. And one of my customers that I had knocked on his wife's door, he said, "Can you come and bring cases to my business? I need 10 cases a week I go through, and I just don't want to spend the time to do that every week or have one of my people do it." So I discovered that actually there was a better market to sell this kind of a service to businesses than to homes. And I think my first year doing that, I netted about $2,000 in 1978 dollars, and that was great money for a 15, 16-year-old.
Wow.
So yeah, I caught the entrepreneurial bug.
That's fabulous. So you already had learned to. I was just at a conference. So I'm going to use a phrase they use there, that 25 people look at something and see nothing, and the 26th person looks at it and sees an opportunity. So you already learned how to be the 26th person that saw opportunity instead of, that's just the way it is. The new way of thinking,
Yeah, I think it was a little bit different. And, I can't say all this without giving credit to my dad. He was an attorney, but he had already understood that kind of thinking, and he was saying to me, you got to look for what people need and figure out a way to get it for them, and that's what an entrepreneur is. And so there was some coaching from my father, and so when I saw that need, it seemed natural to find a way to fill it.
That's so great, and it's wonderful that you had that experience when you were young, and it was successful for you, because that just does nothing but then encourage you to try the next thing. If it hadn't been as successful, maybe, you wouldn't have gone into your next venture, but when it worked out and you wound up with a couple $1,000s in your pocket, you said, wow, this is great. I see an opportunity. Terrific.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow. So where did you go from there?
Well, I had a few other little startup businesses along the way, but and I had some jobs. I worked landscaping for a few summers, and that was very hard work. What it does, it teaches you very clearly that it's much better to earn money with your brain than with your brawn.
Yes.
Yeah. My favorite business in my early years was, and also the most successful, was an ice cream business. I started up when I was a university student. And so up in Canada, summer is short, and students tend to not go to school in the summer. And I had learned from some relatives that downtown Edmonton, there were no ice cream shops anywhere within walking distance of a bunch of high-rise office buildings. And so I had arranged with the city of Edmonton to give me a spot on the street, and I bought an old mail truck, and I converted it into an ice cream truck. And even though it had wheels, it was in the same spot every day for 6 hours in amongst all these government and office buildings. And that was a lot of fun. But, I ate a lot of profits. I gained 30 pounds my first summer.
A great story.
It was, but such fun. And I had regular customers every day. They came for ice cream, and I'm sure I contributed to their waistlines as well.
That's the same thing, isn't it? You spotted something and said, what do people need, or what could they possibly want, and how can I give it to them? I've just been on an entrepreneurial conference, and they were talking about teaching kids the concept of critical thinking, and I like to remind everybody that analytical thinking is when you've got a whole pile of stuff and you're trying to discern differences. You're analyzing it. We break it into Group A, Group B, Group C, if we analyze it this way, and maybe we break it up another way. And we learn a lot of that. But the critical thinking is to look at that pile of stuff and say, something should be there and it's not there. And so what we have to do is put it in because it doesn't exist. And it's much harder to look and see what's missing than it is to analyze what's already there. And I think that's a skill set, and clearly you learn that pretty early.
Yeah, and it helps me with my current business as well to find those gaps in small businesses where they, it's hard to see the forest for the trees, as they say, and sometimes when we're running a business, we don't see, what's missing, and it's a lot harder than we think it is. We think we're seeing the whole picture, but we're not. And you know what? I have a business myself. I'm in this business of helping entrepreneurs, but I have my own business coach because I don't see everything. And I think it's important that we all have somebody that can advise us that might have an outside view of things.
That's very smart thinking. In my own career, I had a consulting business for about 10 years, and we focused mostly on total quality management. And the guru, at that point anyway, the guru was W. Edwards Deming of TQM, and he used to say, a system cannot see itself. And I said, boy, if there's not a greater word or a greater phrase to support coaches and consultants, that's the one. And you've just said it again, you can't see yourself. And, you need somebody from the outside looking at it from a different perspective. And that creates a lot of coaching and consulting work. Sometimes I think half the population is going to be coaching the other half of the population at any one time. That's not bad.
And probably needed, yeah.
Yeah. So what then led you to the business world and your self-employment?
Well, those early years of entrepreneurial ventures gave way to a more traditional, secure lifestyle. I was a young university graduate with a shiny new degree and a new family, and I had a friend who had worked for a big drug company, and he said, "Hey, you should try this." And so I said, well, okay, I'll do that until I find another great business to start. Well, as it turned out, I kind of traded in my entrepreneurial spirit for the security of a big corporate job. And I started off in sales, and I moved up in that industry, moved to the United States, lived in about 5 different states over 25 years, and, moved up through the ranks. Gained a lot of great, rich experience in business, some of the best business training the world has to offer. The corporation paid for my MBA and really put me through a lot of really high-end training. But now my kids are all grown, and so a couple of years ago I started looking at some business opportunities and thinking about getting out of the corporate world and starting from my roots again and doing an entrepreneurial venture. And so I decided that what I liked best in my corporate career was the training and helping others succeed in what they were doing. So combine that with one of my other loves, which is the science of business. What I did is I found a company out of Texas that was licensing some of the world's best training materials. And they were developed by a team of organizational behavior scientists, PhDs, and I thought, this is it. This is what I really want to do. So I licensed those materials, and that's what kind of brought me to where I am today.
Oh, wonderful. Are you still using those materials?
Yeah, that's what my business is based on.
Mm-hmm.
That is my experience.
Oh, cool. That's just wonderful. So, and how long, Doug, have you had your business?
About a year.
Oh, that's wonderful. So it's launching itself still, and you're getting known, and people are saying, wow, you ought to work with Doug. Look at the results that I get. So
exactly.
Yeah. So who are your clients, and kind of what are some of the symptoms they're experiencing when they call you? Why would somebody pick up the phone and call you? Who are they?
Yeah, my clients are businesses between about 20 and 1,000 employees. And so far I've worked with companies in the sectors of healthcare, engineering, manufacturing, financial services, nonprofits, and a couple of others. Really, the only qualifications to be eligible for my services is that you have, number one, people in your organization, and I guess that covers about every business. And number two, you're not getting the results you want.
Okay.
So, yeah, some of the disease symptoms you asked about, that I watch for in organizations are, the typical things of declining revenues or increasing expenses. Maybe there's low productivity and morale among the employees, a negative culture, high employee turnover, disengaged employees, not achieving goals, those kinds of things that are actually fairly common in a lot of businesses.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I'm thinking particularly the disengaged employees, It's bigger companies almost by their nature knock out the entrepreneurial spirit because they need everybody to be marching in step, and they kind of need people to be moving and growing in the same direction. If for liability purposes, for consistency of project and product delivery, for consistency of interaction with the customer, and like you said it yourself, you traded your entrepreneurial spirit for the security of the big company, and that's how they bring about that security, and it disengages a lot of people. They don't feel inspired by the company. So exactly. I imagine that part of your work is teaching the leaders how to inspire their employees, even though they're within that constrained system. Would you say that's true?
Absolutely. One of the big issues that I come across frequently is that a lot of business owners might have had experience in their early years, a few decades ago, with being led by leaders in a sort of an industrial age model where it's very hierarchical, mm-hmm. and there's a lot of command and control, and the leaders dictate what should go on, micromanaging. And that translates then into an entrepreneur who that's the only kind of experience that they've seen, the only model that they've been exposed to, but that's not the kind of model that brings out the best in people. It does produce, just as you said, the disengaged employee. They're there in body and they're willing to do the actions, but they don't bring their talents, their gifts, their creative problem-solving capabilities to the workplace. And mm-hmm. that's what's missing in a lot of businesses. When you can get employees that bring their whole heart and mind and their body to the workplace, then you get great results.
Wow. So would you say that disengagement is one of the things that you see that is one of the big things that you commonly see is preventing a business from being successful?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of human potential kind of being wasted.
Yeah.
People just come to work and they're not given the opportunity because they're being micromanaged or there's a negative culture. If they're not given the opportunity to use their gifts and talents in the business will suffer. And who's going to win? The winner in the equation is the company that does leverage the full potential of their human capital and brings out the best in their people. There are a lot of studies that show that there's actually about a 37% better productivity with this enlightened leadership style that I've been talking about.
Wow, that's fabulous. 37% increase in productivity is pretty big when that's one of those things that gets measured in 1%, 2%, and we're thrilled about that. 37% is just fabulous.
Exactly, and that's a real competitive advantage for companies.
You bet. So, Doug, do you work with the leaders mostly, or do you work with the employees as well?
When I go into a business, I like to do a bit of an analysis and find mm-hmm. out what the needs are. And sometimes there can be a company where it's the middle managers that are really untrained in management and leadership skills that are causing a problem. Maybe the employees are getting disgruntled and leaving, or they're now disengaged because of the style of the managers. Sometimes the problem really lies with the owner or the C-level, CEO or COO level people who also have gotten to that level without really being adept at high-end leadership skills, and they can be the problem. Finding the highest point of a problem in an organization is the goal, because if you try to fix the middle people but the problem is higher, then you'll still have the problem. So you've got to find the problem at its source, which is usually at the highest level in the company.
Wow, yeah. So then, what do you do to for analysis and diagnosis? I mean, how do you go about doing that?
Now, I've got a series of assessments and surveys and tests which will identify problems in companies, and they range. I've got about 60 different tests, and so with an interview with the business leaders, I can figure out which tests to apply to the employees, and then those tests will further, sort of on a very micro level, identify what the problems are and who might be the source of the problems. Is it just a problem where the leaders are not communicating the vision, the strategic vision of the company, and so the employees really don't have a good idea of where the ship is being steered? Or is it because there's somebody in the middle who's maybe got an attitude of undermining the authority of the leaders? Maybe there's some backbiting, some gossiping going on. Mm-hmm. Those kinds of things can come out in these tests that I apply. And probably the most frequent, great diagnostic tools I've got access to. One of the most important is the Employee Engagement Survey. And it's really based on the science developed by the Gallup organization. They did a huge trial, 1 million business people over 25 years. Imagine the data, the richness, and the predictability of the results of that scientific trial. Well, they identified a lot of the characteristics of an engaged employee. And so when I apply this test to an organization, we can figure out if some of the disengagement is due to certain factors that I can identify. So that's a very important tool in my armamentarium of business diagnostics.
Well, I would think so, because as you say, with 1 million people in the database, you really are able to identify precisely what is going on. If you only had 6 people you were talking to, that would be a whole at the other end of the spectrum. But when you've got a database of 1 million people that you can put something against, you can probably spot things pretty quickly, besides your own experience, telling you what's going on.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, this is fantastic. It really sounds wonderful to me. And, I think the consulting along this way of helping people, figure out what's happening in their company is great. And certainly we see a lot of fallout coming with people being disengaged, and they quit working there. They want more out of their life than just working someplace where it's rote and they aren't appreciated, and they aren't supported, and and the company loses too. As you said, they lose the excitement and the innovation and the creativity of people that are working for them. And what a terrible thing that is.
Absolutely. There's a term that I read in an article that I was amused about called presenteeism. We all know absenteeism. Employees are sick frequently or whatever. But presenteeism is when they're present, but they're really not. They're just doing the bare minimum to get by.
Yeah.
And that's a word that kind of means a disengaged employee. And so presenteeism is definitely a big problem these days with businesses. Yep. Yeah,
and they've, at some point along the way, they were willing to trade their engagement or their excitement about their work in order to get security. And of course, the terrible thing about today's workplace is you really don't even get that in the bargain. There's just not security in the workplace anymore. Not with what we've watched in 2008 and 2009, and be on the news, 40,000 people to be downsized, 25,000 people to be downsized. And you think, oh my goodness, how can people feel, appreciated and engaged when their company is doing something like that again and again and again?
Oh yeah, I lived through several. When in my corporate career, I lived through about 6 downsizings over the 26 years, and that just what you said is so accurate. The level of the morale, just the culture change immediately following a downsizing is so abrupt and tangible. It's just incredible how a company can even survive that.
Yeah.
Yet they have to do it because of market forces and the changing environment in the marketplace. So it can be devastating to a business, at least for the short term.
Well, it's I think that the fair exchange, of come work for us for a big company in exchange for security, that trade is not valid anymore, and people know that. So I think that's why we're seeing more of a drive to, even if most of your work is with big companies, we're seeing the bigger companies have a whole slew of specialists, and they bring the specialist in to perform certain tasks or do certain activities or provide certain knowledge, and they don't put that person on the payroll. They outsource to those individuals, and they only use them for that specialized work. So the concept is that each one of us is going to have to put together our portfolio of specialized things that we do, and then go forth and offer that portfolio of skills and experiences and understanding rather than go in for full-time employment. I just read an article that one of my colleagues sent me that said eventually we're all going to be self-employed, and we're beginning to call it the gig economy, that you're going to work a gig rather than a job. So I'm thinking we're seeing the beginnings of some dramatic structural shifts in what our economy is going to look like. And I think a lot of it comes from the breaking of that promise of, you do what we've told you to do and we'll give you security and a paychecks in exchange. And when that promise has gone away, people are going to other things. I don't know if you're seeing that, but I'm seeing it.
Absolutely. I think you've just identified one of the major business environment shifts, paradigm shifts among business leaders is that, 50 years ago, to outsource something was unheard of.
Yes.
You just hired more people. And so, outsourcing say for a medium-sized business, they can't maybe afford a training department, so they hire me. They can't afford, a payroll department, so they hire an outsourced for that. Maybe the same thing for their accounting, their CPA services. So outsourcing definitely is a way that it has two effects. It reduces the head count in any given company, so they don't have the full-time employees with all the benefits that they have to provide and the payroll taxes and all those things, but it also creates a shift, the number of people who are solopreneurs, which is why your program is so important. Yes.
It's just kind of interesting, and we've talked to educators on this show also because they're feeling the impact of this, paradigm shift into, let's say, higher education, where it used to be great to go and say, I've got, an MBA or I've got a degree in such and such, and everybody said, all right, this is terrific. This will get you a job. But now what people are saying is, well, that's okay, but what I want to know is what you know how to do, because I'm not, I'm through with hiring people because they've got a title or a degree, but they don't know how to do anything. And I'm the employer, I'm expected to train you to do stuff. I want you to come to me job ready. I want you to already know how to do things. And this is having, this ripple effect is, marching back towards the education paradigm where education is going to have to train itself to be much more applied knowledge than theoretical. We want people that know how to do things. And, that's having impact on how professors are hired. We're moving away from the tenure track. You can see the pressure on the cost of education if it doesn't give you the applied knowledge. People are beginning to look and say, well, why do I want to go to college anyway? I want to learn how to do something. It's having big impact.
Absolutely. This is the advice that I gave my kids was if you're going to go find an occupation and get a degree, find a degree in which you come out of the degree with your training ready to go, like an engineer or a healthcare provider, where it's not just theoretical. And if you come out with a Bachelor of Science in one of the sciences or mathematics or history or something, nobody is going to be able to use that. That's just knowledge that's sort of dormant and not directly applicable into any specific job. But get a degree that when you come out, you have job ready, exactly what you said, job ready experience and knowledge.
Right. Well, I don't think this has quite shown up yet. One more place that we talk a lot about on this show, Doug, which is about the rise of the encore entrepreneurs. The statistic is that there's 10,000 people a day turning 65, and that's going to continue for at least another 17 years. I mean, that's a lot of people. And, that group really has experience, and they also are starting solo businesses in droves because we really can't afford to lose their knowledge from the workforce. They know how to do things, and, we're finding people that are having a great realization that they know stuff that organizations still need. And so even if they retire, they're turning around and, going back to maybe even the same organization and consulting with them and selling them the knowledge that they have that the business needs to have. And so it's a whole nother, kind of paradigm shift that we've got going where we're saying, well, maybe the young people don't know how to do this as well as we do, so we'll sell you our knowledge. Isn't that interesting?
That is. And that's exactly where I'm at, is I feel like I've got a ton of experience and knowledge that can help businesses be successful, and from very high-end sources. And there's a lot of people like me out there that want to share knowledge and help others succeed.
Yeah.
And a lot of the up-and-coming generations haven't got the experience yet. Now, I also recognize, we older people, I'm just a little over 50, but just at the tail end of the baby boomers. But there's a lot of new approaches to business that if we older people don't keep up with, we will be left behind. And so it's not just the electronic side, but there's a lot of science behind how to run a company with a flat organization, for example, rather than the pyramid-shaped organization. Mm-hmm. So on the one hand, we have all this knowledge based on our years of experience, but on the other hand, sometimes that can be detrimental if we don't keep up with the most recent trends of business science. What is the research showing us is the most efficient way to run a business and to engage employees and to get the hearts and minds of our employees at the workplace.
Do you have a reading recommendation for any of our encores out there who need to learn some of this new stuff?
There's several books that have sort of changed my life, and they're all based in science and research. It's nice to read books about people's nice ideas and experience, but unless there's some kind of large-scale studies behind them, I'm not sure how useful those are. So some of the books that are within the last decade or so, there's Good to Great.
Oh, yes.
There's Built to Last. There's First Break All the Rules and Discover Your Strengths. There's now the name of it is escaping me. Well, there, of course, Stephen R. Covey's materials are, I think, timeless.
They are.
Yeah, and his son now has written a book that I think has some value called The Speed of Trust. And I'm actually doing a seminar on trust in a couple of weeks, 2 weeks from today, in downtown Portland. But that topic, I think, is extremely valuable, and it addresses sort of some of the foundation of a lot of business conflict and what that's costing businesses, because trust is declining in our society, and it's actually costing us a lot. And so the seminar that I'm doing is just a couple of hours over lunch, and will be very valuable for any business owner.
Oh, I love that. I think that's great. Okay, listeners, I hope you were paying attention. Good to great, built to last, first break all the rules. I love that one. And discover your strengths and, what you're calling seed of trust. All important
things.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. The title that I couldn't remember, now I've remembered, is called Crucial Conversations.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that one is so valuable for any interpersonal interactions, whether it's at home or the workplace. Yes,
and I could see how in the work that you do that one would be very, very critical, because that talks how to have some of those tough conversations and leave both parties feeling whole.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I love the books that you're talking about. I agree with you. I have found all of those valuable myself, and I think you're right on. And I think your advice to our encores that yes, you have knowledge, and what you need to add to that knowledge is an understanding of the new science of business. I think that's a wonderful thing to have said. So let's go back to talking about your business. So what do you like best about being a solo in practice?
Well, there's, the big opportunity for me, and what I enjoy most, is that I get to combine three things that I love and put that into a business. And the three things are that I love to help people succeed, I love business itself, being in business, and I love to understand and convey the science behind business. There's a term that I learned when I was in my late teens that I don't hear a lot out there, but the term is anthropomaximology.
Wow.
It's a big word. But yeah, basically it just means the science of studying the maximum potential of human beings. And the science behind that, as you apply it to business, is that it comes back to what we talked about earlier, is that a lot of people have a lot of potential that they're not bringing to the workplace. And I think that most people really want to do excellent work. They want to be fully engaged, and they're most happy when they're being productive. But if they're not that at work, then first of all, they might be looking for another job that gives them that. But secondly, they're really not feeling good about themselves because they're not fulfilling their highest potential. And so the study of what human beings can actually do, and some of the amazing things that we can accomplish when we are well focused, well trained, and well practiced in some of the things that we do every day in the workplace. So that's something that I love, is the science behind business and anthropomaximology. So bringing that to people and helping other people become their best self and apply that to their business. That's what I love to do.
Doug, I think you need to write a book.
You think so?
Yeah.
Well, I might do that. I'm starting to put some materials together for that. So thanks.
One of the keys I have found when you have a point of view and you are a solo operator and you're working to expand your business beyond what you can do one-on-one, and when you have a passion about your point of view, is that you begin by writing your book. And it doesn't have to be huge, but it's basically I'm going to call it your manifesto, your principles that make a difference with the clients with whom you're working. And then, even beyond your one-on-one, what comes up is ways to offer what you do using some of the new e-tools, teleconferences, webinars, things where you can teach groups of people, because I hear a real passion coming forward in you when you talk about all this awakening people's potential. And I think there are a lot of people that would love to hear and experience the work that you do, because I think people are just craving meaning. They're thirsting for meaning in their life, and that you could find some ways to help more people discover it. Keep doing your client work, but and they're very special. And but there's some ways that you could do this in offering classes and seminars online for people that are hungry to do what you're talking about. So that would be fun to talk about.
Brilliant insight. I appreciate the advice, and
yeah,
I think you're absolutely right.
I mean, because I was going to ask you a question about taking on larger projects, and I can see that you already have a larger vision, and you know, I'm not sure it's easy for you to find other consultants or people with whom you could collaborate, but you know, the electronic tools make it easy to get out to big audiences, and I think there's a lot of people that need to hear what you have to say. So,
well, I like to think so. I like to think so. You know, the materials that I have licensed make me part of actually a worldwide network of consultants who have all licensed the same materials. There's about almost 600 of us in about 31 different countries.
Wow.
And, you know, of course, I haven't met all of them, but I've met a few dozen of them from mostly in the United States, but also in Canada and Mexico and Jordan and some European countries. So, you know, it's just a rich supply of experience that I can draw from, and for bigger projects, I'm able to, you know, have people come in from other parts of the country, neighboring states, you know, California, Washington, and help me with larger projects. So a lot of great resources that way.
Perfect. That's perfect that you're part of a group like that, a collaborative group like that, because when you're dealing in the issues that you're dealing with, you want to make sure that whoever is working with your precious clients is delivering, you know, the same level of message and the same depth of connection and, you know, importance. There's an emotional message that is involved in this. It has to do with reaching your potential, and you wouldn't want to have another consultant who wasn't working in the same way and coming from the same grounding that you are. So that's fabulous that you're part of a group like that. Good for you. So, moving on, how do you find your clients?
Well, you know, that is the age-old question, I guess. In marketing, there's a lot of factors that are challenging, and one of the mistakes I made early on was that I took a lot of advice from some of the networking partners, the strategic partners that I referred to that have the same materials that I do, and they're in another state, and things are different here in the Northwest. And so I was trying to work a marketing model here in Oregon that does not work. And so the way that I find clients, the number one way is face-to-face networking, you know, meeting people, inviting people to seminars in which they can experience some of the materials that I share, and then they can decide if they like what I have, they can bring me into their company and do some internal work. So the seminars for the public that I do are really just a means to take me for a test drive, as I might say. So that's the number one way that I find clients. You know, I send out emails and I do search engine marketing and optimization for my website. Those are the main methods that I use.
Really important to do that. And I love the idea of doing a seminar, and as you say, have people take you for a test drive. They get to know you a little bit and know where your heart is and, you know, what you really care about, and you get to display your skill set and your methodology in the seminar, and they say, boy, this could work for me. I think that's wonderful. So what size of business is your typical client?
Well, like I said, I'm targeting businesses of 20 to 1,000 employees, and I've actually delivered training to companies really around the 100 employee mark has been the most common. You know, I've helped out a healthcare organization that was a solo practice, and that was great, kind of on the small side of what I like to do. But if I could pinpoint an average, I would say right around 100 employees. I think there's quite a few companies of that size. You know, the bigger ones, there aren't too many. But if you go, you know, the 100, 200, you know, there's a respectable number of those.
it's probably just figuring out how to get in front of them, how to get their attention. Then
exactly.
Hear from them. And I would guess that you also rely a lot on referrals from happy customers.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a part of several networking groups and chambers of commerce. I have the privilege of being the chair of the Tualatin Chamber of Commerce Business Education Committee and their business programs that we have called Thrive that occur monthly on the second Thursday each month. That's an excellent way for me to help out the community and organize the education that comes to the business owners that are part of that chamber.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you find businesses of that size coming to the chamber meetings?
Some do, yeah. There are a lot of solopreneurs that attend chamber meetings.
Yes, I know that's true.
Yeah, and that's great. And they're trying to build their business, and so am I, and so we're all doing that together. Some of the larger businesses that have attended our Thrive business education meetings come for the topic. So we are continually looking for topics that apply to at least medium-sized, if not large, businesses so that they can participate. Yeah. And we're also, the speakers that we engage for these programs are usually with larger companies so they can offer their expertise to some of the smaller companies.
Oh, that's a good idea. That's a good idea. I think that's a wonderful thing to do. And, of course, I'm a big chamber fan, the most basic way to say it is that my experience is that small businesses are always marketing, and the wonderful thing about chambers is that they are unabashedly places where you can market. You don't have to be suave or smooth or sneaky about your marketing. Everybody there is marketing, and so people are curious about what you do, and you be curious about what they do, and the chamber provides a way for you to do that and a place for you to do that, and it's kind of expected. Whereas so many organizations, you market almost surreptitiously, but the chambers, that's what you're there for. You're there to network and meet people and support the community and market your practice, and I think they're terrific. So, absolutely. Do you see certain business issues are more common now than they used to be, like 5 years ago, because of the economy? Do you see more entrepreneurship? Do you see more struggles with people being good leaders? I just don't know. What do you see going on that didn't used to go on?
That's a great question, because one of the things that I have in my seminars, the items of compelling information, is that in our society, information that's available on the Internet is doubling at a rate of about every 2 years.
Wow.
Excuse me. So what that means to all of us is that we have to keep up with that pace. And now we can't read all of it, and it's increasingly more difficult to do so, but we have to watch for the big trends. And so I think that some of the big trends that we are seeing in the last 5 years or so is something, first of all, that we've already touched on, is that there are more companies outsourcing some of their departments, and so there are more business consultants and advisors and smaller businesses serving the larger businesses as outsources. Mm-hmm. That's one. Now, I think that marketing is changing a lot. When I was a kid, a lot of the marketing was done by mass media, TV, radio,
right.
and direct mail. I think that direct mail has taken a hit, and people just got tired of junk mail and started throwing it out without even looking at it. And so a lot of the effectiveness of that kind of marketing has been declining. And I think that now, in more recent years, email has become the same thing, where, I don't know about you, but I'll look at my email in the morning, and I'll see maybe 20 or 30 messages from companies that I have not solicited anything from, and so I'll opt out or I'll delete without looking at them. And I think that there may be a boomerang effect coming, and this is just my opinion. I don't have a lot to base it on, but I think that there may be a bit of a coming back to some of the direct mail, because now we're getting less of that. Each individual piece might have more impact because the junk mail has gone electronic.
Yeah.
And so the electronic spam that we all experience has become a problem, and now we just need to get rid of it. People are more focused on getting rid of that, just as we used to get rid of our paper junk mail.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
post office will be happy.
Yeah, that may be the post office may have a rebound, but the other direction I see marketing going is more to the social media.
Yes.
So Facebook and LinkedIn, of course, are the big ones there, but Google Plus is growing, and Twitter, of course, is one of the big ones. But people marketing by those methods and doing search engine marketing and tools and optimization, those are probably something that are on the incline and going to stay on the rise for many years to come, decades to come, perhaps.
Wow. Doug, I've just thoroughly enjoyed having this discussion with you today. It's been really fun and very interesting, and I love hearing the passion that you have for people developing their potential and for organizations taking advantage of, really optimizing the human potential of their employees to become more productive and more efficient and more thoughtful and prosperous companies. I think you can tie that directly, and I hear that in your passion and caring about people. So I've loved our discussion. We're just about out of time, but if you had one thing you would tell your business clients today that they ought to be paying attention to, what would that be?
Well, watch for the cancers that can be attacking a business that you're not aware of. And if you're not sure if you have any business cancers or diseases, I recommend an annual checkup, and I can provide that, and at a reasonable cost, and that will hopefully prevent some of the diseases that can kill a business.
All right. That's it's a health checkup that we have to have. So, I'm sure we have a few listeners that are just jumping up and down saying, I need to get hold of this guy. Do you want to tell us how they can get hold of you?
You bet. My website is lighthouse4business.com. lighthouse4business.com. And my number is 503-805-8882. Please call me.
That's wonderful. That is just great. Well, as I say, Doug, I've just thoroughly enjoyed talking with you today. It's fun to find a thoughtful and like-minded, because I'm just in agreement. I'm nodding my head every time you're talking, like-minded person that is bringing really good things to the business world. And I agree with you. It's changing, and I think we have some opportunities to do some really positive things. So, listeners, I want to remind you that you're listening to Solo Pro Radio and that I am Jackie B. Peterson, the author of Better, Smarter, Richer, 7 Business Principles of Solopreneurship. Solopreneurship is one of the fastest growing business models. As we change, we're just changing the very shape of our economy, and more people are taking into solo practices. And, if you pay attention to this station, you're learning some of the multitudinous ways that people put together a solo business, and we all benefit from their expertise and their knowledge. I hope you visit my website, www.bettersmarterricher.com. You can download the free ebook talking about the 7 principles, sign up for my free newsletter, and join the conversation on the blog. We've got quite a lively conversation going. Next week on our Solo program, we're going to be talking to Shelby Rice, who has got a background of retail and a degree in cultural anthropology. She's going to be quite interesting. She's the creator of the Style from Within program. So tune in next week and join us again for a great conversation with another interesting solopreneur. Goodbye.